Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Welcome back, Maverick family, to the Maverick News channel. And of course, right on cue, somebody phones to disrupt. We'll just do that for now. Now, that was distracting right off the top of the program. That being said, narco-terrorists blown out of the water. And now the U.S. government, under Donald Trump's watch. Let me just do this. Do that and do this. And then we will do that. And I will come back to you. They're moving the Gerald R Ford aircraft carrier to a whole strike group into the area around Venezuela. So we've got that going on. Then we have Trump lying again about Ronald Reagan, doubling, tripling, quadrupling, quintupling down on that. We're going to dig into that a little bit more. And I'm going to share some history on previous trade agreements, my personal experience, because I was there. I'm that old, that ancient. I'm that old when it comes to these trade deals. I remember what it was like when NAFTA was negotiated. In fact, I covered some of that stuff back in the 80s and 90s. I'm going to show you some of the old moldy archive footage from that era with Reagan and Brian Mulroney and union leaders of that time too, and a big protest that I covered as well back in that time. What else do we have for you tonight? Oh yeah, a very special guest. A celebrity guest will be joining us near the end of the broadcast to weigh in on the case of the missing ostriches out at the Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood, British Columbia. It's a very revealing report that's coming up. You're not going to want to miss it, because this will give you the definitive dirt on everything going on with the allegations surrounding the CFIA and the assertion that they may be killing the ostriches in violation of a Supreme Court stay as we sit and wait for a decision on whether the cull order will be suspended, canceled, as we wait for the decision on whether this appeal on the cull order will be heard by the Supreme Court of Canada. So stay with me. We have lots to unpack tonight right here on Maverick News.
Maverick News isn't just a news outlet, it's a community of truth seekers. Your donation at freedomreporters.com fuels our mission to report the stories that mainstream media won't touch. Thank you, Maverick family.
We're back. All right, where shall we begin tonight? I guess with the narco blitz. So yeah, Trump is moving. I'm going to have to those phone calls coming in. I don't know why people phone me when I ask them not to. That's why they phone me right in the middle of the program. But this is very, very real. Real broadcasting in real terms. So, Gerald R. Ford. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. So the U.S. is sending the world's biggest aircraft carrier to the Caribbean. The Pentagon has confirmed they are sending the USS Gerald R. Ford to join the buildup of U.S. forces off the coast of Venezuela to make sure that, well, I guess that they hear those sabers rattling. And I've been seeing posts and comments on a number of pretty credible pro-American live streams saying that an invasion of Venezuela is coming. Anyway, here's video.
USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN 78, is the U.S. Navy's newest and most advanced aircraft carrier, featuring electromagnetic catapults, improved radar, and increased sortie rates. It leads the Ford class, replacing aging Nimitz-class carriers for future naval dominance. USS Gerald R. Ford,
so that's just a
CVN.
Look at the ship that's being brought into the area. One moment. Okay, so here we go. This is also from TWZ or TWZ if you're Americano. Just to give us a glimpse of what's going on. Supercarrier USS Ford being pulled from Europe and ordered to Caribbean. There's the headline tonight. Oops, got to go back. We don't want that. We want this. So it says here, the U.S. Navy's supercarrier USS Gerald R. Ford and at least a portion of the rest of its strike group have been ordered to Latin American waters. This represents a new and especially significant deployment of U.S. forces into the Western Hemisphere amid a steady escalation in the scale and scope of ostensible counter-narcotics operations. Strikes on alleged drug smuggling boats have now become routine, and the possibility that the campaign could extend to targets on land, particularly in Venezuela, continues to grow. These are trial balloons that I've been hearing and seeing on social media through influential social media sites, YouTube. People are talking about it, learned people in the loop, and they keep saying these things because they're testing the waters to see what public reaction might be, I believe. It's a common practice before initiating an action like this to see if they actually do have enough public support or tolerance for such a measure. The question is why? Because a lot of people are saying this stuff just doesn't make sense. To me, I think I do understand. It does make sense to me when you look at it from a certain perspective or through a certain lens. And that is, like I've been saying for a long time, you want to carve up this hemisphere into zones, into a zone of political domination, geopolitical domination by the United States as part of a greater effort to divide the world up into essentially three sections of dominance by the three superpowers, the United States, China, and of course, Russia. And Donald Trump, I think, is sort of in sync with that. Certainly just focusing on this hemisphere, and that is why you're getting the Make America First movement. Don't get involved in any of the wars in other areas. Sure, he'll sell weapons, but he doesn't want to send troops in. He wants to distance himself from any kind of external conflicts in other countries outside of the Western Hemisphere, with the exception of the Middle East, Israel, Gaza, that being about the only exception. As the United States becomes less of a factor geopolitically looking at it through that lens. Plus, there's a segment of the MAGA base that has been calling now for some time for military intervention inside Mexico to combat drug cartels and in Central America. And I think Donald Trump is doing this to sort of appease them, to give them something that they've been wanting for some time in order to satisfy them, to just settle them down and maintain their support. So I believe that is part of what is going on down there in a pretty major way. And this is being, I think, used as a military exercise, a show of force to show the world something. But this is somewhat speculative tonight. I have to say that. And this is just my observations. What we really need to do is get Mike Pekarik or another military analyst on here to provide their perspective on this. But here we see that this military journal is acknowledging exactly what is going on, and that is that there's an ongoing buildup of forces in that area. They now have enough firepower down there to really just take over the whole region, not just Venezuela. Sean Parnell, the Pentagon's top spokesperson, made the unexpected announcement about Ford, which is currently on a scheduled deployment in the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea, on a scheduled deployment. He says, quote, and this is on X, in support of the president's directive to dismantle transnational criminal organizations and counter narco-terrorism in defense of the homeland, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has directed the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group and Embarked Carrier Air Wing to the U.S. Southern Command area of responsibility, Parnell said in a statement. The enhanced U.S. force presence in the U.S. Southcom AOR will bolster U.S. capacity to detect, monitor, and disrupt illicit actors and activities that compromise the safety and prosperity of the United States homeland and our security in the Western Hemisphere. These forces will enhance and augment existing capabilities to disrupt narcotics trafficking and degrade and dismantle TCOs. All you got to do is just designate them terrorists, or in this case, narco-terrorists, a new term, and you're giving yourself license to do pretty much whatever you want. Namely, blow them out of the water with missiles, boats, no due process, and a lot of people applauding it, others questioning it, questioning the legality of it, and even the morality of it. Is drug dealing a capital offense? Well, it's the topic du jour over on MSNBC. Topic of debate.
Good evening and welcome back to the Weekend Primetime. I'm Ayman Mohideen along with Elise Jordan, Antonia Hilton, and Catherine Rampell. We begin this hour with President Trump escalating his attacks off of the Venezuelan coast. Today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted a new video on X of a strike on a vessel he claims was affiliated with a designated terrorist organization and operating in the U.S. South Command area of responsibility. Hegseth claimed 3 male narco-terrorists were killed in the strike and no U.S. forces were harmed. Now, this comes as Senator Lindsey Graham announced earlier on X that he spoke with Trump about going after countries who support drug trafficking against the U.S. Graham added, those who continue to be involved in narco-terrorism against the United States will pay a heavy price. But not every GOP senator is towing that line. A bipartisan group in the Senate is planning to force a vote on legislation that would bar the United States from engaging in hostilities inside Venezuela without explicit authorization from Congress. Here's what Republican Senator Rand Paul, one of the senators leading this bipartisan push, said earlier on Meet the Press.
Do you believe that these strikes against these suspected drug boats are legal?
No, they go against all of our tradition. You know, when you kill someone, you should know, if you're not at war, not in a declared war, you really need to know someone's name at least. You have to accuse them of something. You have to present evidence. So all of these people have been blown up without us knowing their name, without any evidence of a crime.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. He also serves on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, it's great to have you on the show. There's a lot to unpack right now with what is happening around Venezuela. I want to get your thoughts on it. A lot of people believe this administration is agitating for regime change. The president authorizing operations inside of Venezuela through the CIA. There's no legal basis for what is happening now off the coast. If they're attacking narco-terrorists, they're also releasing them back to countries like Colombia and Ecuador. Just give me your read of the situation and whether or not there is an actual effort to try to curb Donald Trump's authority while the government is shut down.
Well, it's good to be with all of you. Look, Senator Rand Paul is spot on. He's exactly right here. There's no legal basis for President Trump to be taking these actions. These are extrajudicial killings. We just heard from the president of Colombia that one of the strikes in late September killed a fisherman, an innocent fisherman. So this is a lawless president at home and also overseas. The answer to your question is we will be having a vote, not this coming week, probably the next week, on a war powers resolution saying that the president cannot essentially go to war and try to take out the Maduro regime without authorization from the Congress. And Senator Paul is part of that, as are some Democratic senators. I strongly support this effort. I would hope Republicans would vote to uphold congressional authorization and war powers, but so far they've been a rubber stamp for Donald Trump.
Senator, one of the other things that Rand Paul said in that clip we just played was, so all of these people have been blown up without any of us knowing their name. Would you back a statutory 30-day mandatory ID disclosure requirement after each strike?
Absolutely, because right now we have, Secretary Hegseth coming out and reporting, sometimes just on social media, that we struck these narco-terrorists without providing the public with any evidence. And as the statement from the Colombian president indicated, it apparently is not true. I mean, they don't have the evidence to back this up. They need to present whatever they have. Yes.
Senator, will any legislation include a war powers resolution? Will it include language specifically barring the use of American troops in Venezuela?
Well, I would certainly support legislation barring American troops in Venezuela. If the war powers resolution were to pass, that would trigger all sorts of other reporting requirements. I would certainly support putting that forward. Some of us are talking about it right now, and I do hope that you'd get support large numbers of Republicans to vote to say no American boots on the ground in Venezuela. As you indicated earlier on the show, Trump, he blurted out the fact that he'd signed this secret, not so secret, authorization to go after Maduro. So we know what their goals are, and there's no justification for trying to take out the Venezuelan government without congressional authorization.
Okay, so we know that is not the most up-to-date information. That is not the most recent of clips, but highlights the issue for you. We do have this over on Fox News as well, as the debate escalates on whether Trump's actions in the Caribbean are justified.
Well, John, the Pentagon has been reallocating assets from the Middle East and Pacific, moving warships to the Caribbean since August in what looks like a major military buildup for what many fear is an undeclared war. Just moments ago, the Pentagon announced that it is sending the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier strike group to the Southern Command region to help with counter-narcotics efforts. The Ford strike group right now is currently in the Mediterranean and will take at least 2 weeks to get there. This is the first time that the U.S. military will not have a carrier in the Middle East. For U.S. Southern Command, this is a massive buildup of force. In fact, 14% of the Navy's fleet is now in the Caribbean, according to IEJ media, including a buildup of 10,000 Marines and sailors, a dozen warships, a U.S. Navy nuclear-powered fast attack submarine, the USS Newport News, a vessel that could be needed elsewhere, a special operations mothership with drone capabilities, and 3 guided missile destroyers, USS Stockdale, Gravely, and Jason Dunham, and the USS Iwo Jima, an assault ship, part of an amphibious ready group. They left Naval Station Norfolk in August. The USS Lake Erie, a guided missile cruiser with 32 Tomahawk missiles, was pulled from the Pacific and is now operating near Puerto Rico, but focused on Venezuela.
Holy smokes. Talk about overkill. In many respects, that's what doesn't make sense. Just the sheer amount of firepower being brought to bear over there. It's just mind-blowing. Here's more details on just exactly what is being deployed. Ian Ellis posting today, the U.S. announced its 7th strike in Southcom, destroying a boat affiliated with the Colombian cartel. The U.S. has amassed 10,000 plus troops in the region, with most in Puerto Rico, and 12 U.S. Navy ships also. USAF B-52H bombers plus USMC F-35B fighters conducted a bomber attack demo. Just another show of force, rattling the sabers. Special forces spotted near Trinidad and Tobago. AC-130J Ghost Rider gunships deployed to Puerto Rico. Additional ships arrived in theater military Sealift Command oilers, USNS Henry J. Kaiser, and USNS Kanawha, U.S. Army Landing Craft Utility, USAV Wilson Wharf, Littoral Combat Ship USS Wichita, replaced USS Minneapolis, St. Paul. U.S. installed a new long-range radar system in St. Croix, U.S. VI, and built a new bunker to store ammunition and support drone ops at Rafael Hernandez Airport. New Joint Task Force, JTF, under 2 Marine Expeditionary Force 2 MEF established. Southcom Commander Admiral Holsey retiring. That was a story in itself. Some speculating that he's at odds with Pete Hegseth, maybe even the president, so he's stepping aside over what is going on down there in the Caribbean. Last week, POTUS acknowledged authorization for the CIA to conduct covert ops in Venezuela and previewed, quote, "We are looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control." Yes, Donald Trump did say that. So it's not a conspiracy theory. It's happening. They are talking about a land invasion in Venezuela, which is exactly what I said was the likely plan here all along. That being said, as they're talking about a land invasion, if you still think this is about drugs, think again. The drugs are a pretext. It's the standard routine. Here's that video released by Hegseth. I think this is the most recent strike. I hate to even show this stuff because to me, this really amounts to like a military snuff film. Keep in mind, folks, that what I'm about to show you, and viewer discretion advised here, this is all over social media, though. Keep in mind that there are human beings on this boat. Hegseth posting on X saying overnight at the direction of President Trump, Department of War carried out a lethal kinetic strike on a vessel operated by Tren de Aragua. It seems like they're everywhere now. Amazing. A designated terrorist organization trafficking narcotics in the Caribbean Sea. The vessel was known by our intelligence to be involved in illicit narcotic smuggling, was transiting along a known narco-trafficking route and carrying narcotics. 6 male narco-terrorists were aboard the vessel during the strike, which was conducted in international waters and was the first strike at night. All 6 terrorists were killed, and no U.S. forces were harmed in this strike. If you are a narco-terrorist smuggling drugs in our hemisphere, we will treat you like we treat Al-Qaeda, day or night. We will map your networks, track your people, hunt you down, and kill you. Those are the words from Pete Hegseth. And here's his feature presentation. A boat with outboard motors on the back. I can't really see who or what is on board there. They say they have the goods, they have the evidence to justify this, but so far, I don't think from any of these strikes we've seen any actual evidence presented to the public at all. And we are now up to, as far as I know, from everything I've been skimming from media releases, government statements, and social media, we're up over 30 people killed. I think somewhere around 34 now. We're losing track. They've struck so many people with missiles. Unbelievable. And it isn't that, I'm certainly not defending drug dealers. I'm absolutely in favor of stopping all of it. But again, it's how you do it. Because if nothing else, you need to make sure that you're doing things legally, and you also want to make sure that you put the best foot forward and maintain your reputation as an ethical and moral country worthy of possessing so much power that you can take a peace through strength stance with the rest of the world. So you have the trust of other nations, knowing that you won't use your force excessively and without justification, and that you use it responsibly and you follow the laws. Otherwise, a lot of people get pretty nervous and pretty scared. I wonder what it's like to live in Venezuela right now, not as a combatant, just as a civilian. It must, if you're tucking your kids in at night, and all of this is going on around you. You do have drug cartels down there, no question about it. So you have to worry about that. You have, it's a certain level of crime that you always have to deal with. What level? I don't know. I've never been to Venezuela. I've not been to that country. But with all the saber rattling and Maduro building up his forces and putting people into place, such as they are, to stand up against whatever might be coming from the U.S. military that has this massive buildup of force in the region, it has to weigh on your mind at night. It just has to. Yeah. And then I see the MAGA types posting online, this is what we voted for and we like it. Okay. These things have a way of coming back to bite the United States in the butt, though. Backfiring on them. Because it's shoot first, ask questions later. And then you just think about over the years, all the wars that have really damaged the reputation of the United States globally. Well, we have more things to get into tonight, so let's take a little break. We'll come back on the other side and resume our coverage of today's top news story.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out. of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So, did you see the baseball game last night? Maybe not if you were here with me on this program, but we were monitoring and trying to keep people up to date on the score. And my goodness, holy Toledo, Batman. The score, 11-4. Toronto takes game one. I believe tonight we're into game two, starting in less than half an hour. I'll keep you updated on the score here through the broadcast. A lot of partying in the streets after last night's game, and a lot of Canadian flag waving. Oh, I have to say too, the singing of the national anthem, the Canadian national anthem last night in Toronto at the game. Wow, that was impressive. I saw that afterward. I took in the highlights. Of course, we couldn't watch the game live until we were off the broadcast last night. Now, Donald Trump, he said, there are reports saying that he has approved the use of Storm Shadow missiles, Britain Storm Shadow missiles, and French Scalp missiles by Ukraine, sort of their equivalent of a Tomahawk, not quite up to that level, but the Tomahawk's a big issue. Some thought that Trump might approve their use, but it isn't really clear exactly where all of this stands. Trump's sort of trying to distance himself from this, but I think what you're really seeing here, well, I'll show you over on RT tonight. They are Russia Today. They are saying that it's fake news. Trump denies allowing Ukraine to launch long-range strikes into Russia. This was a report in the Wall Street Journal that started all of these reports, saying that Trump had approved the use of Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles. However, I can tell you that it's very credible. I do believe they are using Storm Shadows and Scalps. I think they've already hit Russian oil refineries with Storm Shadows. Those are the reports that I've seen in the last 24 hours. This is happening. Ukraine is being given more weapons, not given necessarily, but they're sending more weapons into Ukraine. In some cases, Ukraine buying them or going into debt for them or however they're financing it. But Trump saying this report is from the Wall Street Journal being quoted here, not true. U.S. President Donald Trump has rejected claims by the Wall Street Journal that his administration has allowed Ukraine to launch Western-supplied weapons deep into Russian territory. Wall Street Journal reported on Wednesday, citing unnamed U.S. officials, that the Trump administration lifted a key restriction on Kyiv's use of long-range munitions provided by Western European countries for strikes inside Russia. According to the outlet, the policy shift occurred in early October and coincided with Trump's announcement that he might deliver Tomahawk cruise missiles, which have a maximum range of around 2,500 kilometers or 1,550 miles to Ukraine. And then in a post on Truth Social later in the day, Trump described the Wall Street Journal story as fake news. So that's being highlighted by the Wall Street Journal. But I'm still seeing reports out there saying that Trump did indeed have some say in this. True, not true, who the heck knows? First casualty of war is true, and we're in the fog of war for sure. But those Storm Shadows definitely in use over there. So Ukraine being given more firepower. And this, I think, signals a pivot. Following the meeting this past week with Zelensky and Trump and his administration, and there was shouting, we're told, in that meeting. So it didn't sound like the meeting went very well, but credible reports saying that there's still a possibility that those tomahawks are on the table, remain on the table. Not approved yet, but still a possibility. Because there are some people within the administration and within the U.S. military who are advocating for it. And it's still in play. Keep your eye on that. One way, because I think maybe Putin has overplayed his hand. Maybe. One too many times with Trump, because now even Trump, I think, is getting impatient, and it's now a balancing act for him. He's trying to determine, I think, how much of this these stall tactics and gaslighting he needs to tolerate coming from the Russian side, when clearly they're not going to stop what they're doing in Ukraine. Well, he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He wants this thing to end. Yeah, and the Alaska summit, everything that has come after that, it's all been window dressing and stall tactics, I think, on the Russian side, and Ukraine just tolerating the whole thing while they're sitting back, just playing a longer game, learning to play a longer game with Trump, and figuring out ways to pivot away from the U.S. more toward Europe for military support, and they're now getting it. We saw as well that they have this letter of intent to purchase somewhere between 100 and 150 or 160 Gripen fighter jets from Sweden. And that could certainly make a big difference as well. Question is, it's a war of attrition, so which side can last longer? Going after all that Russian infrastructure and energy production. They've put a big dent in oil refineries, and they're now in a point where they're beginning to import gasoline. Russia, a gas station with nuclear weapons. I don't know. That's just that's how some people describe the place. But if they lose the gas, they might be in trouble. On the domestic front, we're seeing ongoing concerns about a possible civil war. This just keeps coming up and coming up and coming up, and it's being, amplified by Trump's destruction of the East Wing at the White House and his plans to build this gigantic, super expensive ballroom, which we haven't even touched on as a story here. But it's becoming a major sore point with Democrats and the opposition, because they're saying, he didn't get proper approval. He's just started demolishing the whole damn thing. Here's ABC highlighting the story, but it's everywhere. And some people, wondering, well, where's all the money for this coming from? It's not taxpayers' money. It is donations, or it's being funded by big corporate donors like Lockheed Martin, among others. So it's being paid for with that. Could the demolition of the White House's entire East Wing have been stopped? That's the question being posed over here. The rushed demolition of the White House's East Wing appears to break a long-standing policy requiring, it says here, a federal commission to oversee and approve construction projects in Washington, D.C. before demolition begins. Not for Trump. You just do it. Bring in the wrecking ball. Here we go.
The historic 120-year-old East Wing of the White House reduced to rubble. Satellite images show the dramatic transformation from less than 1 month ago to now. Along with the building, at least 6 trees have been taken down, including 2 magnolias commemorated to Presidents Warren Harding and Franklin Roosevelt, all to make room for President Trump's 90,000 square foot ballroom. This rendering shows how the ballroom will look when completed, much larger than the White House residence.
I think there'll be nothing like it.
ABC News has learned the White House has required some construction workers to sign non-disclosure agreements, officials calling it standard practice, given the security of the White House. The Trump administration has still not submitted plans to the National Capital Planning Commission, but insists all historical artifacts from the East Wing are safely being preserved. Still more critics are speaking out. Chelsea Clinton in a USA Today op-ed writes, President Trump has the right to pave over the Rose Garden and denude it of roses, as well as turn the East Wing into a ballroom. Still, it is unsettling that such substantial alterations are being undertaken without a historic preservation review. The president says the ballroom, expected to cost $300 million, will be funded by private donations and his own money.
How much am I donating? Yes. I won't be able to tell you until I finish, but I'll donate whatever's needed, I'll tell you that.
The demolition unfolding as we enter day 24 of the government shutdown. Today, more than 500,000 federal workers are set to miss their first full paycheck. And next week, air traffic controllers will miss their first paychecks, raising concern about sick calls that could lead to widespread flight delays.
I can't guarantee you that your flight's going to be on time. I can't guarantee you that your flight's not going to be canceled.
The Senate Democrats yesterday rejecting a Republican bill that would have provided pay to some federal workers during the shutdown.
Democrats are offering 2 solutions that actually include all of our federal employees, not just the ones the president picks and chooses.
Another major concern, food assistance money about to run out for millions of Americans. Political reports, at least 25 states are expected to stop paying benefits for SNAP or food stamps beginning November 1st due to the lack of federal funds during the shutdown.
Okay, so I gotta say, I don't think I have ever seen a time in my lifetime when the United States has been more divided, when things have been more disrupted. And I never thought in my life that I would be sitting here or anywhere talking about a possible civil war. And yet that is where we're at tonight. This possible civil war is what people keep saying. Not just me. Like I'm just telling you what people are talking about online. Again, just even over on YouTube, video after video after video. Maybe because I've searched a little bit for it in recent weeks, but a lot of videos coming up where they're talking about civil war. Over on Times Radio, I took note of this today. This was Clive Stafford Smith. On Times Radio, commenting on exactly that, and he has this concern.
He's been doing all sorts of strange things, sending the National Guard into different states, and the higher up courts have said he can do that sort of thing, which really is the sort of first step towards a sort of civil war. So it's not totally clear how the more conservative judges would act.
Let's get into our first topic this hour. The U.S. Constitution's 22nd Amendment bars presidential candidates who have already won 2 terms in office from seeking a third. But Steve Bannon, former White House chief strategist under Trump's first term, is confident that the Republican Party can change the rules to install Donald Trump into the White House for a third term in 2028. He even boldly claims that he has a plan to do just that. Now,
I brought that to you here last night. Bannon made that statement, or those statements, during an interview with 2 of the senior people over at The Economist magazine.
The president has claimed earlier this year that he has a lot of backing to do that. But let's just look at this seriously. Is a third presidential term actually possible under the Constitution as it stands? Well, let's welcome Clive Stafford Smith, Gresham Professor of Law and U.S. Constitutional Expert. Professor, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
It is a great pleasure. Although I can't think of a song with food in it off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. You've got far more important questions to shed light on than that. Is, without a change to the Constitution, is there a possibility for Donald Trump to run for a third term?
Well, the word possibility is a fairly open one. But look, there are several different aspects to this. The first is that there's a slight loophole in the 22nd Amendment, because it doesn't say that the vice president can't be someone who's been president twice before. Although there's certainly a strong argument looking at the 12th Amendment that that's true. So you can imagine Donald Trump telling JD, you be the front man, that I'm going to run the show. But this is basically what his old friend Vladimir Putin did. He was president for a while, and then he was prime minister, and then he was president again. And there are different ways that Trump might try to finagle that through placing himself as leader of the Senate or whatever. But, the real issue is Donald Trump can do and will do whatever he can get away with. And the issue is ultimately, will the U.S. Supreme Court stop him? And that's a much murkier question.
What is the process of getting that election, of being able to be put on the ballot paper? Is it something that individual states have to agree to? What's going to be the stumbling block if Donald Trump...
And there is a whole movement out there, and there has been. It was even in full swing when Trump was running for re-election. There's within the MAGA movement, there's a strong wave of let's get Donald Trump his third term and maybe more. He keeps posting, and he's normalizing this in people's minds with social media posts, comments on social media, as you've seen, where at first, again, people took it as kind of a joke, or, oh, he's not serious, can't happen, not constitutional. Oh, but wait a minute. No, he's serious. And the people around him are dead serious about this. Maybe president for life.
Tries to put himself on that ballot for 2028. And by the way, we should say that he is going to be 82 in 2028.
The one thing you've got to remember is Donald Trump doesn't believe in reincarnation. He's only got this time around, and he does believe that he is sort of God incarnate. So he's definitely going to not sort of fade quietly into the background. And what he would do is run for the Republican nomination. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in any law that says he can't do that. And in my view, he's clearly going to win that. No one's even going to have the temerity to challenge him. So the issue then becomes, he is the nominee of the Republican Party. What happens then? Then the Democrats would sue to say this guy's not eligible to be actually on the ballot. And then the question becomes, do they win in the Supreme Court? They should win. They'll win with the 3 Democratic nominees on the Supreme Court, but there are 6 Republican Catholics who, don't read any law terribly closely sometimes. I mean, they're all very fine on stopping abortion, just like the Pope says, but they're not so good on the death penalty when the Pope says that. So you have to think, what is the majority of the Supreme Court going to do?
Okay, so I'm just going to zip ahead here a little bit on this interview.
Everyone is talking.
Hang on just a moment. This is a very real thing. I didn't think he would to pull this off, but now, yeah. Hang on just a moment. Let me take a little, here we go. Okay.
After Roosevelt, and clearly it says Trump can't do that. Now, you can try and suspend certain elements of the Constitution in times of war or rebellion. The rule of habeas corpus is one that they've tried to do in the past. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says you can suspend the whole thing and not have elections. So I think they'd have a real problem. And in doing that, he's been doing all sorts of strange things, sending the National Guard into different states. And the higher up courts have said he can do that sort of thing, which really is the sort of first step towards a sort of civil war. So it's not totally clear how the more conservative judges would act. I say again, if I'd been in the Supreme Court on cases I've brought 5 times, and my clients have always been very unpopular people, and we've always prevailed. And I do think the Supreme Court is really quite a rock in the American system. And it's something that's more powerful than anything we have in Britain, quite frankly. So I don't think he's going to prevail on that. I think he's going to have to finagle his way around some other way.
Professor, thank you so much for giving us your time.
And I'll tell you this. If Trump is successful, gets the Republican nomination, and is actually the candidate again, and he tries to get that 3rd term, it's going to be explosive. Who the heck? I don't know how far it will go, but wow, that's dangerous stuff. Because on the Democrat side, people are they're going to lose their mind. You think they lose their minds now? They're going to really lose their minds. And there's so much influence at play here. We're seeing money being thrown around. I would say just outright corruption in plain sight. You're seeing things being lined up for this huge giveaway with TikTok, essentially, where certain handpicked people will be allowed to basically take over TikTok at a bargain basement price for pennies on the dollar as Trump initiates this plan to have it domestically owned by his oligarch friends, big wealthy people, handpicked a select group of people who will be buying TikTok, which is, I think the valuation on that is probably going to be, what's it really worth? Probably $80 billion. And they will get to buy that for pennies on the dollar because of Chinese security concerns. So look for that in the weeks ahead. That's coming. And then you're seeing all of this concern about the possible third term and what's going to happen in the courts with regard to that. Plus, you have the Supreme Court that's going to rule on whether these tariffs that Trump is using, that is implementing using unitary executive power with the stroke of a Sharpie, whether any of that is even constitutional, whether it usurps sovereignty, a degree of sovereignty and power from states. I guess it depends on how scared those judges are. Supreme Court judges. Right now, it looks like he has amassed so much power and has been so thorough in his purging of political opposition from within the bureaucracy and the government itself that he can do almost anything he damn well pleases. And they have all the money lined up behind them right now, too, because they are in power, firmly in control at this point in the administration's life cycle. But as we cycle through and get closer to the end of this 4-year cycle, I think you're going to see some disruptions. I don't know if it's really going to hold together for this aging president, as other people with political aspirations and their sights set on amassing power for themselves. I would not be at all surprised if knives started to come out, even from people like J.D. Vance, well-funded, put into position, put into place by other very rich people, very, very rich people who have propped him up. They've created him. He is being groomed. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. J.D. Vance, he's the guy to watch. Before anybody even heard of his name, they'd made a movie about the guy. You're telling me that's not pre-planned? It's all a movie. I'll be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out. of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow, maybe too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
This is how they used to intercept narco-boats. This is from Fox 5 DC back in 2019, July, as the U.S. Coast Guard intercepted drug smugglers.
Este es Juanes Costas de los Estados Unidos. ¡Auto su barco ahora! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco ahora! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco ahora! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco! That's gonna be hard to get on. ¡Auto su barco!
That looks dangerous.
Este es Juanes Costas de los Estados Unidos.
And then you know who you have and what they're carrying, and you have the vessel and all the evidence, and that's the way that it was done. Now, just blow them up and hope you don't make a mistake, I guess. Collateral damage, justified? Maybe, maybe not. I would say at least give them a chance to stop and be boarded before you blow them up. If they don't stop, then I guess maybe that, I don't know, man. Doesn't seem to make sense to me. We'll keep you updated on that baseball game if we can. I'll monitor. All of that. And Trump still lying about Ronald Reagan. I'm flabbergasted, honestly, by people who are like, oh no, it was AI. It was all fake. And I thought yesterday when I spoke to one of my friends about this, and he said, I think it might just be AI, that commercial that Doug Ford ran, because Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. No, he didn't. Do you not know your history? No, I guess not. Does Donald Trump know his history? Maybe not. I would say he's either an idiot or a liar. It's got to be one or the other, because he's the president of the United States. He's supposed to be well-schooled in all things business and finance and economics, and yet he's saying that Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. Here he is, doubling, tripling, quadrupling, whatever. I don't know how many times he's lied. I can't keep track.
What's your view on what Canada needs to do to get things back on track?
Well, Canada lied. I mean, what they did was terrible. They made up a fake statement by President Reagan. Reagan was a big supporter of tariffs when needed. And we need tariffs for national security, and they totally turned it around because they're getting hurt by tariffs and we're gaining by tariffs. They've used tariffs on us when we had different presidents very successfully, and they've taken a lot of money out of our country, and now we're taking it all back. And so they went out and they made a fake commercial. The Reagan Foundation went crazy when they saw it because it was, the opposite. It was the opposite of what Ronald Reagan liked tariffs, and when necessary, he would use tariffs. We're in very good shape for that. But they took a commercial saying the exact opposite, Canada. And so I'm very disappointed in Canada. They lied. I mean, it was a fraud what they did. Really, I don't think there's much they can do. I just assume leave it the way it is. If you leave it the way it is, it's very good for us.
Will you meet with Prime Minister Carney during this trip?
I don't have any intention of it, no.
He's lying. We ran the full video of Reagan from 1987, another video from 1988, like the video that was used in the commercial that the Ontario government ran. We ran the whole thing in full context, unedited, right from the Reagan Foundation, from the Reagan Library Archives. Ran it for you last night. We showed you. It's just right, plain as day, what Reagan said about tariffs. He did not like them, only kept them on the table or in his toolkit, if you will, during negotiations as a last resort to get something that he wanted in negotiations, but avoided them. And I was alive back in the 80s and 90s. I was beginning my career as a journalist at that time. I covered the political campaign where the North American Free Trade Agreement was the issue that was the main issue during, the Mulroney election, the Conservative government being elected on that issue in Canada. I covered all of that. I was alive. I remember all of the statements, all of the debates, all of this. Here's a comparison side-by-side video put together by the New York Times showing how Reagan's words were not taken out of context, that the Ontario ad was and is accurate. So the ad says, with a sound bite Reagan said halfway through his address. So it was edited for length and for clarity. No question about that. But not taken out of context at all. This does reflect what Reagan believed and what he actually did say.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time.
And then it says here, the next 4 separate sound bites are combined to explain the cons of tariffs. So again, they're combining things, but not taking things out of context.
That over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition.
And then it says here, the ad and Reagan's address end with the same words.
America's jobs and growth are at stake.
So there's Reagan, his words, his original address compared, and you're seeing that it's what he said. It's not fake. It's not AI. Trump even suggested that it might be AI. I'm just going to come right out and say he's lying. He is just lying. He knows that because this goes all the way back to the 1980s, a lot of people weren't even who matter in this discussion, who are watching this, voters. A lot of people don't remember because they weren't alive. And of those who were alive at the time, they probably weren't paying enough attention at the time to what was going on with Canada or the trade wars at the time to remember that particular address. In Canada, it got a lot of play because that was the issue that propelled Brian Mulroney to the Prime Minister's office as a conservative. I remember all of that stuff from that time. We're going to get into that more as well. But, you know, Doug Ford, Ontario Premier, the man behind the ad from Ontario, he's getting some backup on this from the Premier of British Columbia, who says that they may actually run their own ads, even though Doug Ford has indicated he's going to phase this commercial out once this weekend is over with. He wants these ads to run around the World Series. Let me just see if I've got a score at this point. No, don't see any score yet on the baseball game. But Ford is saying, yeah, he'll dial it back now. But I'll tell you, the ad has now had more traction, more reach, more distribution because of Trump coming out and talking about it than it ever would have, even with the $75 million ad buy. Not only is the Premier of British Columbia backing up Doug Ford and his decision to run this, but so too is the Premier of Manitoba, Wab Kinew, who put out this video, not an ad, but a social media post, and very cleverly done.
My fellow Manitobans, Ontario's TV ads present Ronald Reagan's views on tariffs accurately and powerfully. President Trump's damaging tariffs go completely against Mr. Reagan's legacy. And it's clear that these ads are working. If you throw a rock at a lake and you don't hear a splash, you've probably missed. So to my good friend Doug Ford, keep the ads on TV. They're effective, and this country is behind you. My fellow...
Yeah. That's the point. They work. That's why Trump doesn't like it. He's not happy about that. There's a lot of things about Reagan that the MAGA types are rewriting or revisiting or redefining, reimagining, revising history. And the truth is inconvenient for Trump. Let me take a little break here, and we're going to come back and illustrate that for you on the other side.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV, the entire world is watching. On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching.
Okay, so not only is that video getting attention, I also ran that other video from 1988 where where Reagan actually also repeated his position on tariffs. It wasn't a one-off, not by any stretch. He was very committed to being a free trader and a fair trader. Not to say that he never used tariffs. He did in certain circumstances, but they were isolated. And I remember not only that, but also this, which is another video that is making the rounds. And in fact, if you go on Twitter and TikTok on our account, the Maverick News account, you'll see that I actually have one of these videos. I have the video from 1987 posted from months ago. I pulled that and I commented on it, and there's a video of me talking about Reagan even back then. I'm not just saying these things now because Trump is criticizing the Ontario ad. I said them then. I'm saying them now. I said this back in the 80s. This is accurate history because these are Reagan's own words. The guy Twilio, Mr. Twilio, the guy who's running the Reagan Foundation, now Trump appointee, Trump loyalist, Trump minion, he is actually lying too.
You can go to live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go to live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American.
See, Reagan didn't even view the immigration issue. Different time, of course, but I'm certain that he would not be supportive of what Trump is doing with these deportations. I could see him being concerned about the levels of immigration, but not handling the deportations in the way that Trump is doing it. Anyway, the point is, Donald Trump is no Ronald Reagan. He is disrupting not only the U.S. economy, but the world economy, and it's not for the better. Here's a clip from today. I believe this is today. CTV, Marco Mendicino, former chief of staff to the prime minister, on the trade war. Get him up on the screen. Come on, Marco. Mr. Mendicino. Please don't lock us down again.
Canada. He's fighting for workers, and particularly the sectors that have been most impacted by the tariffs. So, look, what do we got? Roughly a couple 100,000 people that work in the auto sector. You got 1.5 million cars that are made in Canada. The vast majority of those cars are sold back to the United States. I mean, the whole point of having an auto pact is to leverage the integration and the skill set of these two labor forces. And I think it makes total sense to continue to fight for that principle as we go forward. Now, I would just say in closing that there is reason to believe, if you track the comments on both sides, that we are getting closer. But I would say that optimism, closer to a deal, I beg your pardon, but that optimism is guarded. And it's guarded because we've seen in the cycle of negotiations some stops and some starts. So, I think it's important to wait and see what follows next. But the Prime Minister is fighting, and he's getting kudos not only from the President, but from Doug Ford, who said he backs the Prime Minister 1,000%. Those are his words, and I think that's an encouraging sign of solidarity at a time when we need it.
And if you go back in time to what Reagan said, to what Reagan did, to the way all of these things unfolded to get us where we're at today, you'll see that Reagan was nothing like Donald Trump. Reagan did not love tariffs. I remember the 1980s. I was, just finishing college and university. I was about to begin my career as a journalist. And I was starting to actually cover stories about this. And it was the hot issue back at that time. And there was a a milestone moment in the negotiations. This is actually in the archives as well at the Reagan Library in the care of the Reagan Foundation, which issued that statement saying that it would, what the Ontario government did was taking this out of context, also essentially threatening to sue the government of Ontario for using public domain footage of Ronald Reagan in the ad. Well, this also material from their archives. I guess they can sue me for using this as well. All of this stuff is public domain. Gonna have to sue a lot of people, I guess. This was 1985. And this is how politics has changed so much. And this is why I'm kind of like, I don't even recognize the political landscape in this country anymore. Well, people are saying, you're a liberal, Rick, or you're a libtard. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Back in 1985, as the free trade debate raged in Canada, whether we should embrace free trade, a NAFTA agreement, rewriting the terms of what was the Auto Pact that was put into place in the 1960s, which did have provisions to ensure that there was a certain level of Canadian content in every vehicle produced as part of that agreement. And it ended up being mutually beneficial for both Canada and the United States as the auto industry grew in both countries and both countries prospered. And then the push for a free or freer trade agreement came along. Mid-1980s come. Brian Mulroney gets elected. Conservative government comes into power. The push for a free trade deal hits a fever pitch. You have Reagan in the White House, Mulroney as prime minister. Reagan came to Canada. Liberal heads blew up as Reagan went to the Grand Theatre de Quebec on March 17th, 1985. It was a photo opportunity of sorts. He ends up on stage with the prime minister. We're in La Frontenac room in Chateau Frontenac. You know that famous building? Hotel? Tourist attraction. A lot of history there. Anyway, here's President Reagan and Prime Minister Mulroney at this theater singing When Irish Eyes Are Smiling together. And this relationship, this bromance, on front pages of newspapers, played on television in Canada and the United States. This is what paved the way for the NAFTA agreement, was this special relationship that these two world leaders had, Reagan and Mulroney. The strange thing is, back then, you had the conservatives pushing for a free trade agreement. You had the liberals opposed to it. They ran against it pretty much. You certainly had the NDP totally opposed to it, and unions at the time saying a NAFTA agreement will lead to job losses in Canada, absolutely opposed. So you had the left against free trade, which to me made sense because they tend to be more controlled economy, not free traders. They want a planned, centralized economy. Conservatives more in favor of free trade. Reagan, a conservative, free trader. Mulroney, a free trader. Both wanted a free trade agreement. Mulroney was elected, got to push ahead with this, and these two guys were like two peas in a pod. That's the way it was back then. Of Canadiana America.
Sure they seal your heart away.
the liberal heads blew up. I remember today you have a liberal government trying to get a free trade deal with the United States. And the conservatives, I don't know. I guess they're still sort of more on the. I don't know where they even stand. Because with Polyev, I honestly don't know what the hell to expect if he ever gets elected. I just get the feeling he just says whatever voters want him to say or what he thinks people want to say. So he's just playing to the electorate in order to. I don't know. Like, do you trust him? Well, here's a sort of ad style video that he's produced on this issue.
No place better symbolizes the Canada-U.S. tug of war for auto jobs than the river separating Detroit from Windsor. A tug of war that has intensified as President Trump has made clear he wants our auto sector and our auto jobs. Now, of course, Mark Carney promised that he could, quote, handle Trump, that he could, quote, negotiate a win, and that he would have a deal by July 21st. Well, here we are, it's almost November, and there's no deal, no win, no elbows, and increasingly, no jobs. In fact, the Prime Minister promised that he was going to build an all-in-Canada network of automotive production. Since that time, what we've seen is the tragic loss of so many jobs. Just recently, Stellantis announced it was moving operations from a 3,000 worker plant in Brampton. And of course, there's been about 1,000 workers who lost their jobs at the Cami plant in Ingersoll, and another 700 workers in Oshawa that have lost their jobs. Meanwhile, GM has announced that it's making $4 billion of investment in the U.S. Stellantis, $13 billion of investment. That's money leaving Canada to go to the United States of America, making them richer and us poorer, all bursting in and shattering into smithereens the promises Mark Carney made to those workers that he would protect their jobs. Of course, he made promises that no one could ever keep, and he broke promises that he should have been able to direct. We needed to focus on the things we can control on the Canadian side of the border. For example, the government's plan to ban internal combustion engines, gas and diesel-powered vehicles is already killing jobs, even though it's not yet implemented. Because, of course, if you're a business looking at making an investment in a plant, you're not going to do it if that plant is going to be banned or severely penalized by a government mandate 3 or 4 years down the road. In fact, you'd move it to another place, like the U.S., where there is no such mandate. Conservatives believe that Canadian business and workers decide what cars to make, and Canadian consumers should decide what cars to buy. In other words, get rid of the mandate and put you back in the driver's seat on the vehicles you choose to drive. Secondly, I don't know what's worse, Trump's tariffs or Carney's taxes. He's got an industrial carbon tax that applies to almost everything that goes into making an automobile. The plastics, the rubber, the steel, and the other metals that could potentially be produced or altered or changed are all more expensive because of an industrial carbon tax that does not exist on the American side of the border, but does on our side. This drives production and paychecks out of our country. Let's get rid of the entire carbon tax for everyone, for everything, for good. Let's cut tax on investment by allowing people to reinvest, businesses to reinvest their capital gains tax-free as long as it's invested here in Canada. In fact, let's take all taxes off of Canadian-made automobiles so that our consumers have an incredible incentive to buy Canadian. We need to fight for our workers, fight for our people and our production. We need to start to put Canadian business, Canadian workers, and Canadian quality of life first. In fact, let's put Canada first.
So, I like a lot of what he says there. But of course, proof is in the pudding. He is in opposition. So he is going to say a lot of things that are negative because he has to criticize. And then he's making promises, but will he actually keep them? And I don't know. I don't know, because when we went through the last election, I heard a lot of rhetoric coming, especially from the pro-conservative live streamers who were clearly in the back pocket of the party. Didn't like a lot of what I heard, especially with regard to the 51st state stuff. So very uneasy at this point. That's all I can say about Mr. Poilievre. He's going to have to earn my trust, because right now I'm a little leery of what I'm seeing. And Carney, I'm not entirely sold on what's going on over there either. So he's going to have to deliver, and we shall see. Proof will be in the pudding, right? So I don't like anything that's going on. Really, overall, all I can say is I just want my country, and I don't like it when Donald Trump lies either. So there's just way too much lying, way too much corrupt money flying around, way too much posturing, way too much BS all the way around. And people are paying the price. It was not even this bad back in the the mid 80s, heading into the 90s, when the Auto Pact was being cast aside, and we were getting into the NAFTA agreement, the negotiations for it. I remember those times vividly. I remember too when I was in one of my old economics professors, Ian Scaife, said at that time, the other thing that was going on as part of all of this, you had at that time the United Auto Workers Union represented both U.S. and Canadian auto workers. And then the union split. I was alive at that time. And one of my old, Mr. Scaife, economics prof, said many times during classes that Bob White, who is the head of the Canadian Auto Workers, became head of the Canadian Auto Workers, was the head of the union, the UAW in Canada, said that it was a mistake for the CAW to split from the UAW because the Canadian auto workers were going to lose leverage. But there were a lot of issues and between, a lot of internal conflict within the UAW across the border over exactly those reasons. I'd have to go back and review exactly what all of those issues were at the time, but I certainly remember the internal struggle. And it's coming back, I think, now to bite the auto workers on the butt, because I think Mr. Scaife was right. If Canadian auto workers were still part of the UAW, they would have the same union that they have on the U.S. side, same representation. The union would be obligated to represent equally, theoretically, the Canadian workers as well as the U.S. workers, and they would have solidarity across the border as we go through this revisitation of tariffs, trade deals, the auto industry. I brought up, let me see if I can find this for you. Here's a video about Bob White, the man who reshaped the union landscape in this country. Oh, did I lose him? I don't think so. Let me see. I may have lost it. No, here it is right here. I got him. This is a Canadian Labor Congress video. I'm gonna run some of this for you. I met Bob White, interviewed him a number of times about this issue and others. The splitting of the union, I was still embarking, getting ready to begin my career, but in subsequent years, yes, met him, interviewed him. Also, you'll see Buzz Hargrove in this, another prominent CAW leader from...
C'était fantastique de travailler avec un type comme ça.
In every democratic society, there is a time when governments who have turned their backs on the people have to take over, and today we are planting the seeds for a major takeover in this country to put another agenda in place.
Bob's most outstanding quality was inspiring pride in all of us For working people across the country, they looked at Bob White, they heard him speak passionately and articulately on their behalf, and it made them feel proud to be working people. And for activists, you walked into a room with Bob White, and he made you feel so good about what we were doing as a labor movement.
Bob's vision was for a large private sector union in the country that would have collective bargaining power, but would have power with government, would have a strong voice that had to be reckoned with, had to be listened to.
I mean, we were all internationalists, and people said, how could you leave an international union if you're an internationalist? We're still internationalists in our union. Bob White was an internationalist to the day he died. When they rejected the autonomy within, Bob White said, well, we have to take the next step, and that is to set up a Canadian union. We're going to look at moving out.
And then we said, we're not going home, we're going to sit around and talk about it. Buzz and Nick and Wendy Cuthbert were our communication person at that time. We had a suite in the hotel, we went up the next morning, we got a flip chart out, we said, what's this union going to look like? We started talking about the first important thing is what kind of an executive board are we going to have? And we said we've got to have an executive board that's got some rank and file input. And we agreed then that the CAW Council Executive was going to be members of the executive board. We wanted to have rank and file input at the top level of our union. And I want to say that was a very key decision we made. We didn't realize it at the time, but it is.
There's nobody around the union in those days that could have made it. Bob White was the only one.
And it was because he had the membership behind him, he had the staff behind him, he brought the local union leadership behind him in his own magical way that he managed to accomplish that.
Il y a une grosse différence entre travailler leader au Congrès de travail du Canada puis leader dans ton syndicat. Parce que là, il faut que tu amènes les dirigeants des autres syndicats ensemble pour pouvoir avancer. Et ça, Bob White avait cette qualité-là d'être capable de rallier les gens autour d'une table et puis de prendre des bonnes décisions. Oui.
We can show the government that the labor movement in this country has the security and has the guts to stand up and be counted on the issue of affirmative action.
Bob was a leader who was prepared to look at the way the labor movement did things and preserve the best, but also question why we couldn't do better or differently.
6 months after I was elected national president of CUPE and Bob had just been elected CLC president, there was a province-wide illegal CUPE strike in New Brunswick. And a lot of the members said, let's bring Bob White in. And Bob said to me, I'll do anything that you want, Jude, but you know what? You and your team have led this. You and your team have the strategy to win this, and your members support you. And if I come in, they're going to say Bob White did this. But it was you and your team that did that. And I want to support you, and I want your members to know that. Bob White supported, he encouraged, he loved strong women. And he did everything he could to support us every single day that he was president of the CLC.
I think Marilyn, his wife, was very instrumental. You could not be married to Marilyn White and not be supportive of women's rights, however you started out in life.
He also raised consciousness, raised awareness. His work with Ahmad Barlow during the free trade debate, opened up a lot of Canadians. Eyes.
We had this incredible two-night debate just before the 1988 election. It was only about free trade, and not just the debate, but the election. And Bob and I went on with Peter Lougheed, who was then Premier of Alberta, and Tom DeKino, who was then head of the Business Council on national issues.
Speaking against the free trade agreement, Maud Barlow and Bob White.
I've seen corporate America up close. I've seen their value systems. I've had to lead fights to stop them from bringing those value systems to apply to Canadian workers. And I don't want those value systems to become the yardstick of the relationship between our two countries.
We creamed them.
What he was trying to achieve was not attention for the labor movement, but was change for the majority of workers.
We represent these people, and we're going to get into this plant one way or the other, just so you know. And we're going to see that some obligations are fulfilled, and hopefully we can do it legally. But we're going to go in and talk to the workers.
You're not doing it legally now.
My friend, this is just as legal as you taking jobs out of this country. Just as legal.
I paused there. My mic was muted. I just wanted to draw attention to the banner that he was carrying there. It said free trade could cost us the country. That's what I remember going on at that time. The left, against free trade, the right, if you want to call it that, the conservatives in favor of it.
Doug, we're coming through. Caterpillar was an example, a pure, raw example of how the absolute free market system left to its own devices destroys people.
He understood completely that you want to rise with your class and not from your class.
He played an incredible role on the international stage, recognizing that workers need to come together. Bella Gallows was a young woman. She was in Canada to build solidarity for East Timor. And Bob made her feel like she was part of her family, held her hand up at convention and tell the delegates, you need to be here. The international labor movement is stronger today because of what Bob were able to do.
Je crois qu'il a compris ça, que le syndicat est plus fort avec l'inclusion de tous les membres. Et il a compris ça dans notre syndicat, au Canada et partout dans le monde. C'est pourquoi il a mis priorité sur la question de la lutte contre l'apartheid en Afrique du Sud.
If the people of South Africa are willing to die for the cause, the least we can do is help them financially and morally in speaking out against the injustice, and we will continue to do that.
When he became president of the Canadian Labour Congress, one of the first international trips he wanted to make was to South Africa. It's hard to explain the type of meeting that those two men had. They recognized each other as soulmates, and as a result of that, there was a mutual respect, a mutually respectful discussion that took place. It was an amazing moment in history. We met with local union leadership. He understood those and cared about them, and liked nothing better than to have a beer and to talk to those leaders about those kind of issues.
His greatest accomplishment is the diversity of the organization and the commitment to building a stronger union, but a stronger country.
If the history of Canada in the 20th century is recorded accurately, it will show the enormous contribution working people and the labor movement have made. They made it by toiling in the fields and the factories, building our railways, our transportation, our communication system, and providing the goods and services necessary to make this country one of the industrial G7 nations of the world. Secondly, history must also show the incredible contribution the labor movement has made to the development of a civil society. In the building of economic and social justice, not just for union members, not just for workers, but for a large cross-section of our society.
He understood that his role wasn't just about the day, it was about tomorrow. And that's what made him so unique.
He was a formidable voice on behalf of workers.
I'm sure that I challenged myself to do better.
Bob was democratically, altruistically.
I remember. I think as divided as things were back then, as heated as the exchanges were, the debates, the rallies, the political campaigns, the elections of the time, through it all, there was just a greater degree of honesty. What's going on now? Just, it's disingenuous. It's twisted, distorted. Where are we going to end up when you have a president who just takes a conservative icon like Ronald Reagan and lies about him to exploit him. Redefining conservatism, rewriting history. Rewriting history with lies. I'll be back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
I'm back. You know, nobody's going to tell me what I know when I know what I know because I was there. I lived through it. I covered it. I met many of these people, many of these newsmakers back in those days. I know of what I speak because I was there. I don't say that out of arrogance. I say it out of necessity in order to preserve my freaking sanity in the face of these lies. There was good, there was bad. There was fallout from the North American Free Trade Agreement. Why was all that done? I'll tell you what I remember from going through all of that at the time as we go through this again. But in a much more dangerous way this time because of what Trump is doing. There were options back then. Now Trump is trying to leave no option because he's using the tariffs, not just for economic purposes, but to put pressure on Canada as he honestly tries to take over the country using economic warfare. But back in those days, the debate raged. The conservatives were selling it to the voters as much as, you know, about economic efficiencies as it was about saving money on things like cross-border shopping. So a lot of Canadians, especially in border communities like Windsor, you know, you can go over to Detroit or even people within an hour or two of the border, wherever you lived in Canada, you can cross the border and you can buy things duty-free, or, you know, there won't be any tariffs or any taxes or any fees. Duty-free was the big catchphrase at the time. And everybody thought if we had free trade, you'd be able to go over to the States, go shopping and come back and just bring your stuff back. And there really wouldn't be anything to declare at the border because there wouldn't be any fees on anything. And that wasn't really true. That never actually came to pass at all. We ended up with freer trade, not full free trade. It depended on what you were purchasing, and sometimes you would cross the border. And of course, some things you're buying in the States, because we used to go cross-border shopping a lot when we lived in Windsor for over 10 years. Go over to Detroit, but you buy things at the stores over there. Some of the stuff wasn't made in the United States or Canada that you were purchasing over there. So there were still duties, and even things that were manufactured in North America, Canada, USA, things like tires or whatever it might be, there would still sometimes be duties that you would have to pay or taxes when you came back across the border. So you'd get pulled over and you declare what you have. What'd you buy? You show them the receipts. You go in. You still do it today, and you pay your duties, your taxes at the border coming back into Canada. And so too, you do it going back the other way on the U.S. side. It was never totally free trade. Anybody that tries to tell you that this is going to result in like a complete free trade deal or completely tariff-free, they're out to lunch. It never works out that way. It doesn't work that way anywhere in the world. There's no such thing as a pure free market economy. And even in a socialized or even a communist country today, you don't get like an economy that's purely centrally planned. There are always free market elements that are integrated into the entire system. It's because that is the nature of things. That's what the way things work. Nothing is pure. And it won't be completely pure at this point either. Anybody online, I'm seeing some of these young whippersnappers, these social media influencers, journalists who are posting things like that even tonight. It doesn't work that way, guys. They're going to negotiate and they're going to come to some sort of an agreement, and there will be different charges on different things and different rules and regulations. There will be tariff and non-tariff barriers on various kinds of trade. It has to be that way. It's just going to work out that way. No place in the world has a pure free market. Even within Canada and even within the United States, there are fees between states. There are fees and taxes between provinces and trade. And non-tariff barriers too. Like you can't be a plumber in this province and go to that province without getting different certification. These are non-tariff issues, but they're non-tariff barriers to trade. I remember at the time, so people were like, "Oh, I can't wait for the NAFTA deal to take effect, and I'm going to go shopping in the States. I'm going to save all this money." And then people would go over, and you'd come back, and it was less on a lot of things, but there were still fees. And did things work out the way that one side or the other predicted? Yes and no and no and yes. There was some stuff that was predicted on both sides that came true, and other things that didn't. Certainly, the warnings from the unions at the time saying that the NAFTA agreement, which replaced the Auto Pact, which had been in place since the 1960s, in terms of autos, okay, NAFTA encompassed all forms of trade. Some tariffs still in place in some sectors for cultural reasons, for reasons of food sovereignty, like milk marketing boards and supply side management for agriculture, things like that. So there were some carve-outs. It's complicated. It's complex. But the union said Bob White carrying that sign could cost us our country, could cost jobs. That was the point. And yeah, we did lose jobs because NAFTA incorporated Mexico. And under NAFTA, you had lower wages in Mexico. And as a result, that attracted investment. Factories relocated to Mexico in some cases because they could hire people for a lot less money. There were quality issues at a lot of the factories down there at the time as they tried to bring people up to, standard with training and so on, but much lower wages in Mexico. The problem, I said at the time, this was me, for whatever I know, I said the problem with free trade is that you have freer movement of goods, but not of people or labor. And so it puts workers in each jurisdiction or country of sovereignty at odds with each other. You're competing, but you can't move. And so if you lose your job in a country because of a trade deal, you can't move to the other country to take the job there because there's a labor trade barrier in place. can't get a work permit to go work in the States. That's why the tariffs are such a threat to workers in Canada and, frankly, on the U.S. side as well, for economic reasons and reasons of comparative advantage and economic efficiencies. Another issue aside, but back then, NAFTA. Yeah, the United States did lose jobs under NAFTA because it was much freer trade, and some plants were built in Mexico and jobs migrated. And at that time, you had very rich people who controlled big corporations. They were following the profit motive, and yeah, they would export jobs. You lost a lot of jobs at the time, not just to Mexico, but to countries like Japan and China over time, as China emerged as an economic superpower. And Canada lost jobs too. That's what Trump doesn't understand, is Canada very much integrated with the United States, especially on the auto sectors, in the auto sector. We were like kindred spirits, cousins, relatives. We grew the industry together from the very beginning. Even the union was integrated, the United Auto Workers, one union representing workers on both sides of the border, which at the time, even though workers from Canada could not go to the U.S. necessarily to pick up jobs if there were layoffs here, the union still represented Canadian workers and took that into consideration on both sides of the border, because it was. And I remember auto executives speaking at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit some years in their forums, speaking about how executives from Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, saying that they treated Canada and the U.S. as one market, Canada and the United States. It was true. It's even true today. It's one market, the auto industry, and very much so. Some trade barriers there, some provisions in place to protect Canadian interests and U.S. interests. And as the deal took effect, these predictions of job loss, yes, they came true. Canada and the United States losing jobs. And it wasn't just in the auto sector, it was in other areas as well. Canadian truckers came under immense pressure, independent truckers at that time, because of companies being swallowed up by big U.S. trucking firms like J.B. Hunt at the time. A lot of independent truckers couldn't make a living. By 1990, everything came to a head. I've spoken about this on the program before. You think the Freedom Convoy was something to behold at the borders, right? Because the Freedom Convoy spilled over into other areas of Canada, including the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor. Well, I'll tell you this. What happened during the Freedom Convoy at the Windsor and Detroit Ambassador Bridge, it was nothing compared to what I saw in 1990. And there were two of these blockades that took place involving truckers. I'd never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything quite like this since. And I was there covering this live. I was on the ground. Don't tell me what I know. I was there. Let me show you. There's very little online about this because it's all actually, if you go searching for this stuff, it's overwhelmed by references and search results that showcase the Freedom Convoy. But this was 1990. See that guy right there in the hat next to the guy in the suit? That's Wayne Whitney. This guy here, he and I, we had a relationship, man. We got to know each other very well during those protests, and they blocked that bridge for days. You think Canada doesn't have clout? Let me tell you, yes, we do. When they blocked that bridge in 1990, the business community freaked out on both sides of the border. The U.S. government, the state government in Michigan, they freaked out. They were losing so much money because of everything, not just the auto industry, but all trade, all traffic was stopped. No trucks going across that border, man. And that threw a whole monkey wrench into the US and Canadian economies. Canada is important to everything going on in the US. Don't let Donald Trump fool you. This protest went on for days. Trucks were backed up all the way down here on Church Road from the bridge all the way back out to the 401. Like as far as the eye could see. I remember driving the length of it on the opposite side to get video to put on television. And Wayne Whitney and I, we had long conversations, and it was very clear at the time that he had them by the short and curlies. He asked me, what I thought at the time, and I said, like I can't tell you what to do, Wayne. And at the time, I was going through I had to deal with like ethical questions as he was asking me what to do, and I was like, I can't tell you what to do. I have to just cover this thing. But I trust you, Rick, he said. And I said, well, that's great, but I'm a reporter and I'm here to serve the people. I can't advise you what to do. If you want my assessment of things, I think you've really got them backed into a corner. And he did, with all the other truckers who were supporting him at the time. And they were backed way up. This all because of free trade. Truckers not able to make a living. Let me find you the, I think I've got the clip. Yeah, here it is here. So here's an article from way back then. Wayne Whitney, he was arrested. Ultimately. Here's an article. Canadian independent truckers and government officials agreed Thursday to end a blockade that snarled traffic at several U.S. border points and resulted in the temporary layoff of thousands of auto workers. It was centered really in Windsor, but it was happening at Queenston, Lewiston Bridge, other locations, also Sarnia. Canada's federal transport minister at the time, Doug Lewis, emerged from a 3-hour meeting with representatives of the truckers to say a deal had been reached. Lewis said he wanted to make sure competition in Canada is fair to all truckers. Details of the agreement with the truckers were not immediately released, but truckers were angry that American competition, aided by lower fuel and maintenance costs, had taken away Canadian jobs. I've got tears in my eyes, said Wayne Whitney, the trucker who organized the Windsor blockade. David fought Goliath, and David won. Sort of. Not everything that was promised was delivered. Border crossings at Fort Erie, Windsor, and Sarnia in Ontario have been closed to commercial traffic after hundreds of truckers, thousands, clogged roadways leading to the border crossings. Customs Canada spokesman said, adding it would take some time to clear up the backlog. Some truckers indicated they would not budge until they saw details of the agreement. The protests in Canada led to backlogs of trucks in Michigan and New York State. The agreement was not reached in time to prevent thousands of Canadian auto workers from being sent home due to parts shortages. General Motors of Canada's Oshawa complex, which houses 2 car and 1 truck assembly plants, was shut down, and 11,000 day shift workers were sent home, according to a GM spokesman, Nick Hall. Hall said 4,300 workers at Scarborough, Ontario van plant and St. Therese, Quebec car assembly plant worked shortened shifts. The U.S. spokesman said the blockade did not affect GM operations there, but I do remember that there were impacts on the U.S. side. Ford Motor Company spokesman Peter Olson said, we lost production yesterday at Dearborn Assembly for 4 hours and lost 11 hours at our Michigan truck plant and 9 hours at Louisville, Kentucky assembly. I remember too, and this goes on, there was huge impact on the U.S. side. The auto companies were using helicopters to fly auto parts across the border to factories over there. And it wasn't just the auto industry, it was everything. Everything, all trade. The trade between Canada and the United States is massive. It was then, it's even bigger now. It's probably twice as much in many sectors as it was back then. When Trump is sitting there, we don't need anything from Canada. This is not a big deal. He's bluffing. Yeah, Canada is going to suffer, but so too is the United States. This is bad all the way around. And it's just not honest. He's lying when he says that Canada doesn't matter. We do. He just thinks that he can get what he wants by putting the pressure on. He might be right. Depends on who's got bigger balls, I guess. Wayne Whitney had pretty big balls back then, but took things so far. Came back with a second protest because they didn't get everything that they were promised and did end up being charged and shunned even by the industry as a result. I think he became unemployable, lost touch with him over time. Don't know where he is today. That was a long time ago. I learned a lot. Learned a lot back in that time. I hope that the people negotiating with the United States on the Canadian side look back and learn from what happened back then. Because a lot of the same issues are back on the table right now. But what was negotiated then, what transpired then, what we got then, what we had then, what we've just had up until this moment in time, it's over. Probably forever. Time to change. Adapt. But don't give up.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so I promised you a special guest, a special celebrity guest, and indeed I think I can deliver. I think. You know what? Let me just check on this to make sure we're going to get this celebrity guest in here. Let me take one more quick break. I'm going to come back, get this all lined up, and this all relates to the crazy ostrich story out in Edgewood, British Columbia. I'll return after this.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
One more moment. Going to come back. I've got him. Stay tuned.
Brightleaf Innovations is excited to offer our newest investment opportunity, the Turn Easy Bed Storage Solution.
Turns with a touch, spins all the way around. Every little thing you need is easy to be found. No more clutter, no more mess on the floor. Just spin it, reach it, you don't search anymore. Turn Easy Bed, spin your world around. Storage made simple, the best you found. Shelves your way, keep the mess away. Charge it, store it, night or day. It custom shelves for your books or your tech. Cozy space for your treasures to protect. Built-in power when you need to recharge. Smart design that makes your bedroom feel large. Turn Easy Bed, spin your world around. Storage made simple, the best you found. Shelves your way, keep the mess away. Charge it, store it, night or day.
Designed and developed by Brightleaf Innovations. Proudly Canadian and patent pending in North America. Turn Easy Bed transforms how you live.
To learn more about this innovative new product idea and exciting investment opportunity, call 519-784-0222 or visit brightleafinnovations.com.
So I've been speaking a lot about honesty, accuracy, and with this ostrich story, also just so many lies being told. Can't get on board with lies, so don't want to participate in lies. People can say that. I'll let people, I've even had people on the program. You want to say what you want to say? Go ahead and say it, but I'm not going to repeat it. And I'm not going to promote it. And I'm not going to use it as a tool to generate clicks. But online, even tonight, still seeing these allegations that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency is doing an end run around this stay order, which prevents the cull from proceeding at the farm with these birds that are under a cull order because of the deaths of 69 birds back in December because of avian flu. And we're waiting to find out if the appeal to have this cull stopped will be heard by the Supreme Court of Canada any day now. I expect probably this week sometime, maybe, I hope, whatever. I'd like the story to end. But anyway, as part of this ongoing massive coordinated information warfare campaign to save the ostriches, which I don't think it really has anything to do with the ostriches, or it has very little to do with the ostriches. It's all political. Part of the campaign has been to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And part of that has involved gamifying. You know what gamification is? If you want somebody to become engaged in for a longer period of time on a website, or if you want them to, you want to get their attention and really hold their attention online with a video or whatever, one of the techniques that's used is gamification. It's turning something into a game. That's what they've done out at the farm. They're using every form of psychological manipulation that they can use in order to further their narrative and keep people engaged. They've gamified the whole campaign by spinning up a narrative of the ostriches being possibly killed illegally by government officials, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, who have right now legal custody of the farm and the birds, while this protest is taking place outside the police lines, fenced off, taped off with police tape. They've gamified it. How? By getting people to count the ostriches. And they don't even realize what they're doing. They don't realize how they're being manipulated. They're being sucked in to a game. Count the ostriches game. This has been going on for a week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever. As like, our ostriches are missing. It's also part of a deflection because the owners of the farm could not account themselves for their own ostriches, as they admitted in public, on public address systems, on live videos, as they said over and over again that they had 400 ostriches on site, then 398. Then they said that, then the CFIA took possession. They did a head count. They could only come up with 330. So there's at least 70, maybe even as many as 100 ostriches that have mysteriously vanished right off the hop. The farm owners said at one point, Karen Esperson said, well, we really don't know. She stood up in front of all the people in the tent when this became a question. She said, well, it's somewhere between 300 and 400, but it doesn't really matter. All that doesn't even matter if it's only 2. We just have to save the ostriches. We don't know how many ostriches there are. That blows my mind. Also raises some red flags. I started to ask questions like, where did the ostriches go? Why can't you account for your ostriches? You have maybe, 300,000 to $500,000 or maybe even $1.5 million worth of birds that you can't account for. Anyway, these are serious questions, all directed at the farm because they couldn't account for their own birds. Then the narrative, they twisted the narrative. Then it became, wait a minute, the CFIA did something wrong. The government did something wrong. The birds are missing because of the government, even though they admitted that they couldn't even count their own birds. They didn't know how many they had. And they have yet to produce any kind of a manifest or a ledger to prove at this point. And I don't want cooked books. I want something verifiable. I don't know if that's even possible at this point now. They don't know how many birds they had. They're accusing the CFIA of killing these things. And then some of these influencers, they're weighing in on this and they're backing this up and they're part of the gamification. They're chasing dumpsters down the road. They're accusing the CFIA of killing the birds, chopping them up, putting them in garbage bags, throwing them in dumpsters, and then taking them to not a landfill site, but a gravel pit. I watched the video. I said, no, there's nothing credible there. Can't prove that. I'm open to the idea, but you got to prove it. And they have not proven anything. And in fact, I showed you a video the other night of protesters, Jeff Gaudry, Jim Kerr, speaking with the RCMP liaison officer. What was said in that exchange, live streamed, ran it here. RCMP officer was laughing as they were talking about what was in the dumpsters. And he was laughing, chuckling, smiling, came right out and said, I know there aren't birds in those. He said, I just know there are no birds in those dumpsters. So he knows. He said that out loud. Then Jeff Gaudry said, yeah, I don't believe there are really birds in the dumpsters either. He said that, ran it here. And yet they persist. They keep on talking about how the CFIA is probably slaughtering the birds without permission. I'm not. If it's happening and they've broken the law, then if anybody breaks, they're not above the law. And they should be held accountable for it. If they're doing it and they're within the law, that's another matter. I don't know. It's a big question mark for me, but I don't But based on what the police officer said, based on what Gaudry said, their social media manager and PR guy for the farm, I don't believe there are ostriches in the dumpsters either. That's what he said. I don't think there are birds in the dumpsters. And yet here's this guy, David Creighton. Somebody messaged me that this guy's a great reporter, Rick. Really, because I watched, some of his stuff, and he said, quote, "It's impossible to know." As he showed the video of the garbage bags in these dumpsters that have been taken from the farm, he said it's impossible to know what's in there in his own video, but then proceeded to still spin up a narrative to suggest to people that that's probably what it is anyway. There's probably birds in the dumpsters. Impossible to know, but that's what it is. That's great reporting. Then on this post, is this 330 ostriches? Count and let us know in the comments. Gamification. Footage taken from the mountains with zoom lenses. So they've turned it into a game. Here's the footage. Okay, everybody count. I see a lot of ostriches down there, quite a few. Now, the other thing is, this is not, can you trust this? Are they showing you the whole farm? Are they showing you every corner? Are there some birds in buildings? I don't know if some have been moved off site. Whatever. I don't know, but I don't know if I trust the protesters to show you footage that is going to be accurate. They can show you an empty field to say, where are they? I'm not there. In any event, keep everybody engaged. There's a lot of ostriches down there. But either does the farm know how many they have. Anyway, we'll just pull out of this. But here's the thing, and this is pretty embarrassing, I think, for Mr. Creighton. It's embarrassing for the farm tonight. And it's embarrassing because as you scroll down in the comments, somebody asked Grok to analyze images, I guess. And so somehow, and again, I can't say, I can't verify, but this is does appear to be an authentic Grok post. It says, I analyzed the video frame by frame. This is AI, dividing into 4 zones, because somebody up here said, do a frame by frame analysis, setting up zones in the frames to get an accurate count that you can. Okay, so somebody did and used AI. I analyzed the video frame by frame, dividing into 4 zones: left field, center enclosure, right pen, back area, to avoid double counting during pans. Counts 85 in zone 1, 110 in zone 2, 75 in zone 3, 60 in zone 4, total 330 plus or minus 20. Matches reported farm figures from the CFIA, not really from the farm, but low-res aerial view limits precision. And here's another one. I reviewed the video frames in greater detail, dividing into 6 smaller zones and counting dots across multiple stills to minimize overlap and account for movement. My refined estimate is 315 to 325 ostriches. This matches CFIA's official count of 300 to 330 at Edgewood, BC farm. Video resolution still limits exactness. Oops. Asked people to count. That's what they did. Got a little help from AI, came up with the exact number that they didn't want you to get. Well, I've been seeing some people, all different numbers. Oh, there's only 100. There's 150. There's one. They're all over the frickin' place. They don't know. They do know. I think they do know. I think they know where every one of their ostriches is and has been. I think that when they were saying 400, 398, before that, like a long time ago, they had over 500. It's one of the biggest ostrich operations. It is the largest ostrich farm in all of Canada. You're telling me they can't account for things? You're telling me that they just don't count birds that are worth anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 a piece, depending on how you value them? a minimum of $3,000 market value. Oh, well, we don't know. There's another three grand over there. We're not accounting. Bull crap. You have $3,000 lying around. You don't count it. You don't keep track, eh? I wasn't born yesterday. I'm old. I smell something. Don't smell good. I'm not counting because I can't trust the video. It's not, it's not something that is of value to me at this point. I need real evidence, and I need material. I need video from reliable sources. And just before we get into this last leg of this, no, I see somebody saying looks like the Jays are winning again. Let me just check that because I did promise to get you a score. So, what is the score? Well, what I'm seeing here is it's a tie game, unless something just happened that hasn't been updated yet on my feed. As of 5 minutes ago, yeah, the Jays scored to tie it up. So keep watching. Big game. Not over yet, according to what I have here. What inning are we in? We are in fifth, bottom of the fifth, according to this. I'm not watching the live feed. I'm picking it up from a score tabulator online through Google. In any event, the whole thing out there is just absurd. They've not been honest. They don't talk about the COVID research. They just say they're working on antibody stuff. That's at the heart of a lot of the issues out at that farm. And with regard to the bird flu stuff, they say they've got this magic cure through the antibodies and the ostriches. Show me the proof. They haven't been able to show the court the proof. And now they're leveling accusations of criminal activity at the contractors and or the CFIA and the RCMP and those officers. They're saying somebody out there is engaging. They're suggesting or alleging, I think even outright accusing at times, people of engaging in criminal activity at the farm. The CFIA, the contractors hired by the CFIA and or RCMP officers on site, accusing them of killing the birds in contravention of the Supreme Court of Canada's stay order. I'm skeptical. And I'm very skeptical of their claims that a lot of these birds are missing, that they've just disappeared, that they've been killed, and it's hard to count them, and they've turned it into this game. So I asked this celebrity to join us tonight to help us get a handle on how many birds are actually out there. We need an expert in this field. And this was actually I got this idea, was not my idea originally. I can't take credit for it. I was inspired to invite this person on tonight by Phil Primo, who sent me a video very similar to this overnight, but I thought it needs a little bit more. We need more depth. We need more expertise. So tonight, I've asked the Count to join us, to assist us in assessing how many ostriches are at Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood, British Columbia, because I, as a serious journalist, have to compete with the likes of Mr. Craden. No offense, Mr. Craden. And others who have launched this very serious investigation into how many ostriches are actually still out there.
Let's count the ostriches. Can you count with me? One fluffy ostrich. 2 very fluffy ostriches. 3 great big fat ostriches. 400 ostriches. 297 ostriches. Oh, uh-oh. I only see 8 ostriches. What happened to all the ostriches? I see 3 ostriches. The disappearing ostriches. Someone seems to be stealing all of our ostriches. Quick, call the police. Dial 911. 911. The number of the day. 911. Call the Crime Stoppers immediately. We need to investigate the mystery of the missing ostriches. Calling all sheep to count the ostriches.
See you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.